Well, I asked for your questions and you responded, so thanks to you that took to Twitters and submitted your questions for this Q&A. Let's get through these questions and see if we can't have a good time, shall we? South Life Gold starts us off. Clearly a Jaguars fan because the questions are all Jaguars related. First, is Leonard Fournette a top 5 running back in the league right now? And if not, where would you rank him? We've only had him halfway through his rookie season. I don't know if we can quite crown him just yet. But the reality and the truth is he probably is. He probably is. I mean, he's been everything that the Jaguars needed out of taking him 4th overall. And it again kind of dispels the notion of you shouldn't take a running back high. If the talent is there and the player is good enough, then you take him that high, period. Because you can say that about so many other positions. If, not taking a running back in the first round because of shelf life, because you can find guys later on throughout the draft. Well, I can say the same thing about wide receivers. Why would I take a wide receiver in the top 5 when a guy like Antonio Brown could be drafted in the 6th round? I'm just saying, we could create our narratives accordingly. But Leonard Fournette is a stud. And he's been a stud for the Jags. And then is Jalen Ramsey's trash talk an advantage or disadvantage? It can be both. Look, I'm not trying to crimp on Jalen Ramsey's game considering how well he plays outside at corner. He is one of the true shutdown corners in the league, or close to it. So every once in a while, his trash talk could be a problem. But even in the case, if you're referencing the Cincinnati game, it was A.J. Green that got himself disqualified, got himself ejected by overreacting to Jalen Ramsey's trash talk. Yes, you could say, well, Jalen Ramsey got kicked out too, but, you're talking about the best weapon on the Bengals got out. So even then, it's kind of like, you'd like him to rein it in sometimes, but I don't want to mess with the kid's swagger, and I don't want him to stop being a confident player. Yakum Flavor, who is worse, the Bengals of the 90s or the Browns of this decade? I will go with the Browns of this decade because I feel like they're even a more dysfunctional mess, and then you have to go back to the previous decade. Ever since they came back into the league in 1999, they largely have been the skid marks of the NFL. They really, truly have. When you look at that entirety of work and that entire body of work, which I feel like you have to, I would say the Browns have been worse. Luke Perez, if the Bears fire John Fox, who should the team reasonably hire? The reasonable hire is Jim Harbaugh. Now, you will say reasonable versus realistic, and that's a different story when we're talking about the Bears and it comes to the head coaching search. But when you look at Harbaugh, to me, there are 3 jobs that would have appealed to him. Cleveland, because they might be in a position to offer him both the head coaching gig and some personnel power. Not to mention that they will be so desperate, they might drop their drawers and give him the most money. And this is a team with a ton of draft picks, so he could really come in at the absolute bottom of the bottom, similar to what he did years back with the 49ers, and say, hey, I could turn this thing around. And he's shown that he can turn programs around. He can turn teams around. So it could make some sense. He could find his own quarterback. He could do this. He could do that. There is some talent spread out throughout the roster. It's not a total shit show. It just mostly is. So Cleveland makes sense. Indy makes sense. He once played there. They've got Andrew Luck. If Andrew Luck is healthy, then obviously that's a job with an incredible amount of appeal. Would he go there? Maybe, maybe not. I still think the best fit is the Chicago Bears because they've got the young quarterback. You've got the running game with Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen. You've got the defense that's already at a certain level that could get better with his old defensive coordinator in San Francisco, Vic Fangio, there. And he was originally drafted by the Chicago Bears. If we want to go that angle with the Colts, you must go there with the Chicago Bears. He was a former first-round pick of the team out of Michigan in '87. And you talk about media markets, it's the biggest. He'd get the most attention. So I think it's reasonable to expect that they would pursue him. Realistic might be a different question. Dapiano 1, if Bears finish 8-8, do you still fire Fox and risk losing Fangio? Yes. John Fox has to go, and who's to say that you have to get rid of Fangio? Because number one, if you didn't like any of the other options out there, who's to say that Fangio isn't worthy of a shot at being head coach? Number two, if you say, okay, we don't think so, well, what if you hire Jim Harbaugh? You really think Jim Harbaugh is going to want to replace Fangio? I don't think so. You have to fire John Fox and let the chips fall where they may. Because long-term, the success of that organization is going to be based off of Mitchell Trubisky, not the defense. That's the priority. It's finding a guy that can help Trubisky, not a guy that keeps the defense intact. Dave Garcia, with the new head coach and more talented wide receivers, can the Bears make the playoffs? Yes, down the road. Young Savage 0. Are the Jets a potential suitor for Kirk Cousins? I believe they'll have quite a bit of cap space. They clearly have a need. They're going to be out of position to draft a marquee quarterback, and frankly, I don't know if there is a marquee quarterback in this 2018 draft based off the way things have shaken out so far. Yes, they could be. They could be, absolutely. But it depends on if the Redskins put the transitional tag on him, then probably not. Rosario, will my Chargers ever be relevant in my lifetime? Well, unless you were like 6 years old, they have been relevant in your lifetime. I look back at that mid-2000s stretch with Schottenheimer, and you're talking about a team that had Drew Brees, and then they had Phillip Rivers, LaDainian Tomlinson during that whole stretch of the 2000s. They were relevant then. I remember during my lifetime, at least. This is a team that, under Bobby Ross, with Stan Humphries as their damn quarterback, with somebody like Junior Seau leading the way on defense, that made it to the Super Bowl after the 1994 season. So they've been relevant. Will they be again? Sure. They're quasi-relevant because they're in L.A., although L.A. doesn't really seem to care. But relevant in terms of on the field in a football sense, maybe, but it might not be anytime soon. Karan _Lofton, is Baker Mayfield a franchise quarterback, and should the Browns draft him? I don't know, and I don't know is the answer to both of those questions. Because there's that stigma to me attached to Oklahoma quarterbacks that I'm not usually a big fan of how they translate to the NFL level. That said, I feel like Baker Mayfield has improved greatly here in 2017. But I haven't watched enough yet to determine if he has franchise quarterback capabilities or not, nor have I watched enough to be able to say that the Browns should draft him number 1 or draft him one of the 2 first-round picks. Not ready to say that yet. Give me a couple months. Rob Lewis, who wins the college football playoff? I don't have a freaking clue at this point. I have absolutely no clue. I will say this. I feel like if a 2-loss Ohio State team ultimately finds a way in, that they might be the ones. Alabama is good, but and really good. I don't know if they're special. I think they're beatable. Clemson has to get through the ACC. Miami potentially has to get through Clemson in the ACC. Oklahoma, I don't know if they play enough defense. Wisconsin currently undefeated in the Big Ten. I don't believe in them. So I look at it right now. Unless an Auburn goes on and beats Alabama in the and what the fuck is it, the Iron Bowl or whatever the hell. But even then, do you think a 2-loss Auburn team is a national champion? I don't really know at this point. It's a great question. Davidson Crooks, your opinion on Jalen Hurts after 2 seasons at Alabama? I think for Nick Saban, he went with him right away, and long-term, it was the best thing for the program, because the best thing about Jalen Hurts, if you're a Crimson Tide fan, is that as you watch him grow and develop and improve, is that he's no real threat to leave for the NFL after the 2018 season. At least I believe it to be. So you've got the guy for another 2 years. And this is a guy that came this close to beating Deshaun Watson in the national championship game. Jalen Hurts almost won a national championship as a freshman. I think he's getting better. I don't think he's a super stud, but Alabama really hasn't prided themselves during this significant, massive run that they've had of excellence. With having big-time quarterbacks. I mean, A.J. McCarron's probably the best of the bunch, sure, but I don't know if you would call him a true marquee quarterback. Maybe at the college level, maybe. But Jalen Hurts is like a better version of Blake Sims. How about that? But a guy I feel like at the college level you could definitely win a national championship or 2 with. Derek asks, thoughts on the Pistons start to the season? Surprising, really to me, came out of nowhere. Type of team I thought would be in that 6-9 mix in terms of the Eastern Conference and a borderline playoff team, or maybe just miss. And you're talking about right now that the season ended. Granted, it's only like 14, 15 games through the season, but you're talking about, what are they, like 10-4 as I record this? And number 2 seed in the East? Yeah, I didn't see that coming. Whatever they're doing is working. Keep it up. Kay Nokaj, would you rather have Porzingis or the Greek Freak? I got to go with the Greek Freak. I love the unicorn, the Latvian bear, Porzingis, but the Greek Freak can do more. He's more explosive. He has more positional versatility. I just feel like he can do more things on the basketball court, and there's not that much of an age difference between Porzingis and the Greek Freak. And the scary thing about the Greek Freak is he's only in like his early 20s, so he hasn't even reached the peak of his career yet. Like, I look at Antetokounmpo and I say that this guy, once LeBron steps aside, might take over the mantle as the best player in the NBA. So yeah, I got to go with Greek Freak. K Zenma233, what do you think of the NBA rookies so far? Not enough of me watching to give like a full opinion. I will say that I'm not surprised that there's an issue with Fultz in his shoulder. If you watch enough of my videos, I just really question whether or not he was worth the number 1 overall pick. But right now for Philly, it doesn't seem like it's mattered that much. Lonzo Ball is struggling with his shot, his confidence, and he's playing with absolutely zero assertiveness, but he's doing some other good things on the court. It is concerning that as the point guard and potentially the future face of the franchise, that he's getting yanked in the fourth quarter in games. Kyle Kuzma for the Lakers has been a godsend, a revelation. The rookie I care about the most is Lauri Markkanen for the Bulls, and he looks like he's going to be a stud! Stud! And that warms the cockles of my heart. I'll get a Michael Porter or somebody, and then we'll start talking. But not enough games watched to have enough of an opinion on him, honestly, fully. Matt Meffe2, will the Cubs re-sign either Arrieta or Davis? I believe they'd be much more likely to re-sign Davis than they would Arrieta. But we'll have to see what the starting pitching market is for Arrieta. I've been really surprised that people are talking about Yu Darvish would get more money and more years than Arrieta, because to me, statistically, they're pretty much a wash. Arrieta has more playoff experience and more quality playoff experience at that. And so I'm kind of surprised by that. But I think he's going to price himself out of Chicago. Personally, I wish the Cubs would consider a massive move, getting rid of a couple of bats like Schwarber and Hop and a couple of whatever arms they have left in the system, and go after guys like Archer and Colomé from Tampa. When you think about having these guys that are cost controlled for several years in terms of the contracts that they have, be a way to address your starting pitching need and a bullpen need, because you really need to remake that bullpen. I've heard a lot of talk about them going after Alex Cobb, and I don't see why you would. I would rather trade for Chris Archer and Colomé if possible. Otherwise, why wouldn't you sign somebody like a Lance Lynn? In that case, if you're going to give Alex Cobb potentially $20+ million a year, I would just rather you keep Jarek Arrieta if that's what you're going to do, personally. But I do think Davis gets re-signed unless his deal gets way out of bounds. But I think he'll be back. Peter Jedra, moving away from sports, asked, is beating the Trumpers are racist idiots drum counterproductive? Even if you feel like sometimes it may stick, ultimately it is counterproductive. And I say that because, one, people typically don't like to be insulted. Two, sometimes people don't like to be told the truth about themselves. But three, it also opens you up on the flip side to hypocrisy and double standards that do exist. Because here's the thing. Some of the Trumpers, as you're calling them, will support the Donald no matter what, because everything will be a conspiracy, everything is fake news, and blah, 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 and they believe the bullshit that idiot peddles. Maybe some of the other people could eventually be swayed, but the way to sway them is to actually talk about the issues and not in a spin type of talking points, BS type of manner. But when we look at something like tax reform and saying trickle-down economics is not sound economic policy just because Arthur Laffer says it is. Furthermore, this country has done it to mixed results. Kansas is doing it currently, and it's been largely a disaster. But more so than that, it is like you have a kid who's getting, let's say, $5 a week in allowance, and you decide that you're going to give them $15 a week with the hope and expectation that they will voluntarily do more work, but you are setting no guideline or no firm expectation or no thing of saying, hey, this is based off of this, but this is based off of this. You have to work more or do more in order to get more money. You're just basically giving them an extra $10 a week without any real firm expectations, rules, guidelines, agreement of anything. You're not putting any qualifiers. You're not turning it into incentives. It's just, we're going to give it away to you. And really, at the expense of, you could either say, other non-corporation taxpayers, especially middle and lower class taxpayers, or you could say against the national credit card, which is the national debt. It's just not sound fiscal policy to talk about massive tax cuts for corporations and higher-end earners, and frankly, across the board, really, and sit there and believe that that's going to massively stimulated an economy, because if you give businesses and corporations who already have trillions in the bank, now granted you could say they're not just truly sitting on it, because these banks then turn around and loan that money out into the economy, but you have businesses that have billions upon billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars, and when you think about corporations as a whole, literally trillions of dollars sitting in banks, granted being loaned out, but still sitting in banks, that they're choosing not to invest in their own businesses, that they're choosing not to hire more workers with, that they're choosing not to pay their people more. Why do you think giving them more money is going to stimulate the economy? Or on the flip side, and let's say that the GOP is right here, and let's say that it starts this massive growth curve and this growth spurt in the economy in terms of businesses and hiring and investing in infrastructure and this and that, you're going to end up nuking your economy, and you're going to get massive inflation, and you are going to have an incredibly bad bubble in a couple of years. Period. That's what's going to happen. Because even if you sit there and talk about tax cuts, in a lot of these businesses, it's still about supply, it's still about demand, some of those economic basic principles. And just because you have more money in your pocket doesn't necessarily mean that business is going to grow or get better. Furthermore, when you give corporations more money, what are they typically going to do? They're going to buy back more of their stock. They are going to pay higher bonuses to their CEOs and executives. And then they are going to invest in digital infrastructure, which means, oh, ding dong, dumb dicks, down the road, they'll have to hire fewer employees and pay out less money in wages and benefits and such. If the GOP really cared about businesses and corporations, they wouldn't worry about statutory tax rates, which the vast majority of big corporations and even medium-sized businesses do not pay anywhere near the 35% corporate tax rate any damn ways. What you would do is get businesses out of the business of having to help provide health care. I look at my health care with my employer, my premium over the course of the year. Now, granted, I have to pick up a kid on that, so the premium is much higher, but it's only about $1,500 a year. Why is that? Is because my company pays about $7,500 just for the benefit itself. Not even talking about the out-of-pocket costs that come down the road. Imagine if my company did not have to do that because we had a single-payer healthcare system where it was already built into our tax structure. I could potentially make thousands more per year, and the business wouldn't have to cover any of that or cover any more additional. It would be covered under that 35% corporate tax rate. Shouldn't have to be something additional. That's why corporations and businesses try to use all these loopholes to lower this rate, because they still have to pay this tax and that tax and this tax and that tax. And having to provide health care and benefits to your employees is a tax, and a significant tax. And it comes down to the people that believe that unions and wages alone are what drive companies out of this country. They are the people that just don't get it. Because it's so often the case where we try in this country and in this world in general to make things very black and very white, and there's no gray. The truth is, it's almost all gray. And we lack significant context by believing, hey, I'm going to sit there and say that this company is outsourcing all of these jobs because of a union or because of this. No, that is one piece of a much greater puzzle. And part of it economically is, I use a banana example. If a country like a Colombia or somebody can produce bananas at 1/10 of the cost of, let's say, the state of Florida, where does it make more business sense to produce those bananas? It makes more business sense to produce those bananas in Colombia or in South America or wherever the case might be. I mean, that's just the nature of the business world. You're going to gravitate to where the economic conditions are the best for what you're trying to do. And to sit there and say it's wages alone, let's say an employee is getting $15 an hour and that job gets outsourced to India or the Philippines or somewhere else for $3 an hour. It's not just the wage. It's the fact that this $15 an hour person also gets medical, they get dental, there's 401k, some companies offer pension. It's all these other things that these businesses try to do to stay competitive in the marketplace that creates the issue. So again, it's not just about wages, and the people that think it's just about wages are fools, and they don't understand, and they really should stop talking about it. Antonio Vargas, I'm going to move on from that one. Given Dems' recent success, can they recapture the Senate in 2018? I don't think it's a foregone conclusion, in part because there's not a lot of seats out there that the Democrats can really win. You maybe look at Nevada, Heller's seat right now, and Arizona, what is Jeff Flake's seat now? Those would be up. They really need that Alabama seat in December. They need Jones to win that seat because right now it says 52-48. That would make it 51-49. And at least they could say, you know, if they could get to Heller's seat in Nevada, even if they didn't get Arizona, that would put it at a 50-50 split. Yes, if a vote is along party lines, then Mike Pence would be the one that would issue the tie-breaking vote. But if not, if you got one Republican, which we know is quite common based off of what's happened so far, to flip, then you know what's going to happen is most legislation is not going to pass. So even though the Democrats wouldn't be a majority power in the Senate, they would be, for all intents and purposes, wielding majority power because it'd only take one Republican to fall out of line with Trump and the GOP leadership, which is happening quite consistently on major significant things such as healthcare and tax reform and the like. So it wouldn't stop everything, but it might potentially be easier for the Dems to get control of the House in 2018 than it would the Senate, even though the House requires a lot more seats coming into play. Because you're talking about local races as opposed to statewide races, and you're also talking about just the sheer number of the seats, because every 2 years, all 435 House seats become available. So they could, but they really need that Alabama seat if they're going to do it. James Faluca, your position on the Dems GOP only being allowed to debate is one of these things that we complain about the two parties, we complain about the limited choices and the lackluster options we're given, and we do nothing about it. Ultimately, regardless of if you're liberal or conservative or somewhere in the middle, or you believe this party's better or that party's better, the simple truth is, throughout our recent history specifically, they both take divergent paths to the same end result. And I break it down to the national debt thing. Like you're talking about liberals, Democrats will tax and spend and think the government alone is the solve of the issue, and they will explode the national debt that way through spending. Whereas the Republicans will borrow against that national credit card, the national debt, by issuing out tax cuts and giving subsidies and all this other, again, just like the Democrats, in a lot of ways, fiscally irresponsible crap. So at the end of the day, does it really matter that much? Does it really? Creative Love. Who would have won GOP nomination if Trump had not run? I don't know, but ultimately he did run, so it doesn't really matter. And I say that because it's really hard to know how the dynamics of that race would have broken down on the GOP side in 2016 if Trump wasn't there. Because it was so dominated by Trump and everything was about Trump, it's hard to know. Could it have been a Rubio, a Cruz, a Kasich? Could it have been a Ben Carson? Could it have been a Jeb Bush, a Scott Walker? I don't know. I don't know. Might have been none of them. Might have been somebody else that stepped into the fold. Hard to know, and not worth speculating about. Mac Muroff closes us off. Oh, you creepy fucker. Have you started watching hentai yet? No. You white boys in this hentai. No, that's not my thing. I love black lesbian porn and black girls getting cream pies, okay? But specifically black lesbian porn. I'm not watching hentai. That's for you, weirdo. All right, thanks for the questions. I'll see you later.